With at least 100 official X-Men, some are bound to slip through the cracks. From possible princesses to those with a power you wouldn't want to have, these are some heroes lost to X-Men history. It's hard to have a weird backstory in the Marvel Universe, everyone seems to have one, and yet somehow Eva managed to have the weirdest I've heard. EVA, or Eva, was grown in the body of a man. She was his nervous system in physical form. The man in question here is Phantom X, which we will get to in a second. While in her early stages, she was just a little bug-looking thing, almost like a little ship. She could fly and use electricity as a weapon. Eva now, as you may or frankly may not recognize her, has taken on a more human form. That happened when her host, Phantom X, died the first time. She mutated into the form of a human woman with silvery skin. Since Phantom X was her host at first, she always maintained a connection to him. It was actually his lover. Eva's powers include electric charges, flight, she can change her size and body type, she can create powerful illusions. Additionally powerful, with Phantom X's help, she can regenerate pieces of her body should she lose them, and she is capable of being a weapon as herself. Phantom X is able to throw pieces of her that act like stun darts. Eva has about 70 appearances in total, with her last one around 2019. Now moving on to her host, Phantom X. I will admit he's been around more, around 150 appearances, which might sound like a lot, but the main X-Men in comparison have appearance counts in the thousands, so 150 is nothing. You're probably wondering how a man could grow Eva in him, manifest his nervous system into a girlfriend. Well, he was created not exactly 100% human, more like a human cyborg. He was part of the Weapon Plus project, and he actually goes by many names: Mutant Man of Mystery, Charlie Cluster 7, and Le Phantom X. See, Phantom X likes to use a French accent, a bad one, allegedly, because he knows it annoys people. There might also be additional reasons for it if you choose to believe him. According to Phantom X, he grew up in a virtual France and it wasn't perfect, so that's why he loves the French but is not a perfect Frenchman. Phantom X's powers include Eva, a healing factor, super intelligence, super strength, he is scent free, so very hard to track, and literally believes he is the best. He can't see anything as better than him or he will have a mental breakdown, I am not kidding. This extreme X-Men is catching waves but not a break. Slipstream, or Davis Cameron, was just your average Australian guy surfing, vibing, live, laugh, loving, but soon he would not be doing any of those things except living. He is alive, a win is a win. Slipstream, because he is a surfer, used a hoverboard as his means of transportation. His mutant ability was the ability to form quantum portals, also known as warp wave. The portals were used for transport over large or small or just any distance on Earth, and they could be used by anyone. Slipstream went a while not knowing he was a mutant. It wasn't until the X-Men showed up and told him and his sister Heather that the two were the children of a crime lord, and then Heather later revealed she was a mutant, so of course Slipstream had to get his powers activated by Sage. He helped the X-Men fight against alien invaders but was hurt pretty bad. When he left the hospital, he disappeared for a while, but then showed up to fight off some people attacking Krakoa, so eventually he ended up there. Honestly, some of these mutants haven't exactly disappeared, they just don't get storylines after theirs is over, and they're usually only remembered by Marvel when they need extra mutants to fill out a scene, you know? Like, oh, Slipstream was in this battle, cool, great, but like, how is he doing? Mentally, how is he? Anyway, Slipstream has about 19 appearances total. Sister to Slipstream and Golden Girl, literally, Heather Cameron is Lifeguard. The golden Australian princess, she is all of those things, we'll get to the golden princess in a second, found out she was a mutant before her brother did. She, with Storm and Thunderbird, defeated some attackers, and that's when she discovered the mutant powers. And it's a really useful one too. She can clock what the present danger is to her or those around her, and her body will modify itself automatically to give her the right powers to save the day. So her power is like really fast adaptation. Some powers she has gained while confronted with danger include golden skin, told you we'd get there, extra arms, gills, wings, a fishtail to live her H2O, just add water dreams, and extra strength. So we've acknowledged the golden skin part, let's cover the princess thing. Lifeguard was on a mission to infiltrate a spaceship that belonged to an alien race. While doing that, Heather's appearance changed to the appearance of the alien race, and her DNA switched around, and people think she may have been of royal alien descent based on the markings on her. Her brother couldn't handle the alien look, unfortunately, that his sister was sporting, and he disappeared, so she was looking for him for a long time. Eventually, both siblings ended up on Krakoa. Lifeguard's name comes not only from her lifeguarding mutant powers, but also from the fact that she was a lifeguard back when she didn't know she was a mutant. In total, she also has about 19 appearances. Ariel the alien is an icon and a fashion icon bring her back. Her original design was this epic 80s fit, just lots of colors, and even in her redesign she's still full of color. She hails from this place called Coconut Grove, and it looks like your average nightclub. All the aliens there are capable of teleportation using doors. If there are no doors, too bad. Ariel is special and different though. She is a mutant in her world. She has the additional power, a power passed down through her family, of super persuasion. She is described as she who speaks like water running across the stones. Ariel can make people do or think almost anything she wants using her charming, persuasive voice. Ariel ended up in San Francisco at one point and then joined the X-Men and stayed affiliated with the team since. In total, Ariel has about 18 appearances. I feel like Coconut Grove is a vibe and sounds like a Mario Kart track, but if I could, I would transport myself there. Let me know in the comments where you would choose to transport yourself. Changeling is a forgotten man despite his major contributions to the Marvel Universe. The biggest thing he did for Marvel was die as Professor X, so even his big moments weren't fully him. Changeling is a shapeshifter. He has become many people, but two really stick out. One was Elvis in the middle of a car chase, and the other was Professor X. Changeling wasn't always an upstanding citizen. He was a bit of a menace at first, but a cancer diagnosis and a few months left to live changed the Changeling's whole perspective. He now wanted to do better in his last few months, so he went to Professor X. Professor X gave him quite the chance. Pretend to be him while he goes underground to prepare for an alien invasion. This worked for a while, and it had its perks for Changeling too. Before becoming the Professor, Changeling had telepathic abilities, but they were limited. When he did become the Professor, he needed more power in that department in order to fool everyone, so Professor X gave him a major power boost. As Professor X, Changeling passed during a battle with Grotesque. He was brought back to life for a brief stint for a She-Hulk storyline, that's when the Elvis thing happened, but in the end died again. Another version of this character does exist out there, and he does kind of eclipse this version. He was revamped, he got powers and better storylines, and a new name, Morph. But at his core, he is a shapeshifter, and the OG version had about 17 appearances total. Most duos that we've seen on this list are equally as known as the other, not here though. You might have heard of the X-Men Sunfire. Well, he has a sister, also an X-Men. She's named Sunfire, and she has way less panel time with only about 7 appearances in comparison to her brother's 247. A reason for this could be that Sunfire didn't know she had mutant abilities for a long time. We actually didn't see her discover them, but we do know it took a while for them to appear. Her powers, shockingly, have to do with the sun. She can absorb solar radiation and coat her body in fire. She can generate powerful blasts of energy known as plasma blasts. She can fly, she can create a very hot force field around herself that can melt incoming bullets, and she can sense heat signatures. She was part of the X-Men team for a brief moment, helping them retrieve Professor X from Magneto, but after that mission, she was done, she was gone. A very cool character that has a suspiciously low appearance count. I guess for Marvel, she's too hot to handle. Time-controlling mutants are common, but each one still deserves the time of day, including Sway. So Sway controls time, but you probably got that from my first sentence. Her time-controlling capabilities are for stopping time and making time replay. So it's not like going back in time, but instead she can go back to a spot and see like a phantom of what happened there, replay the events. What's cool about that is that other people can see the phantom images too. Her stopping time originally meant that everything stopped, but with training, she was able to stop select objects and everything else would be fine. Sway was originally Suzanne Chan, and her backstory is tragic. When is an X-Men backstory not, right? Her mutant ability manifested while out with her parents. Her family was caught in the crossfire of some bad people. Sway unconsciously stopped the bullet aimed at her, but because she didn't know she could do that, she couldn't save her parents. She was in and out of places that could not help her, but then found the X-Men. Well, the X-Men found her, kind of. Professor X needed to save the X-Men from Krakoa because it's not a safe space for mutants at that moment. He took her and 3 others and created a little team to get the original X-Men back. The island is where Sway met her demise, and now she's only appeared in minor appearances and is generally not the first mutant people think of when you ask, with only about 5 appearances in total. Sway, of course, made some friends while on that little X-Men team, and one was Petra, meaning rock in Greek. Petra handled all things Earth, so geokinesis. She rocks, literally. She can manipulate rock into different shapes, even Sword's Minecraft queen in real life. She can also cause earthquakes and create holes in the earth, not like the center of the earth kinda deep, always. Sometimes it's just a little one is enough to incapacitate someone. She can also change the state of a piece of earth, like creating diamonds from coal or making glass from sand. Again, she is a Minecraft character in real life. Dust clouds, telekinetically flying on rocks, and consistency manipulation are also in her power set. The consistency thing is making the earth like wiggly or soft or smooth or all the opposite of those. Like Sway, Petra has a traumatic backstory. She accidentally caused her entire family to experience the fatal effects of a rock slide, and then she became an orphan and was placed in a foster home. Her foster father acted inappropriately towards her, but she trapped him in the ground, good for her. She went on the run, hiding in caves, a run-in with the police, and some training with Moira McTaggart later, and our girl was on the reserve X-Men team with Sway. She also met her end on the mutant island. Like Sway, Petra is also not at the forefront of most fans' mind with only 5-ish appearances, but that doesn't mean she didn't rock. I've heard this guy described as paste for plot holes. Apparently, he's been around since the beginning, helping out with major X-Men missions, but his horrible mutant ability means literally no one knows because they all forgot. We all forgot Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not literally is a mutant with the power of being forgotten. Even machines forget he's there. He was trapped once by a machine, but then it forgot he was there and he was able to escape. Though he is forgotten, he still exists. Obviously, if he drinks some orange juice, people can see the orange juice is gone, they just won't remember who did it. After missions with him, the other X-Men would be left with gaps in their memory. Eventually, Psylocke was able to put a part of the puzzle together. What's really tragic about Forget-Me-Not is he literally sacrificed himself to save Krakoa from Nimrod, and no one remembers. In total, Forget-Me-Not has about 14 appearances, and I just totally forgot who we were talking about. I'm kidding. Forget-Me-Not, I will not forget you.
There have been a lot of Avengers. So much so that some of the various card-holding members have just been kinda lost in the sauce and forgotten by both the comics and even some of the fans. Of all the forgotten Avengers, Stingray, Walter Newell, feels like the biggest upset for me. He's actually an incredibly cool character. The problem is he just got kind of overshadowed. I feel like ocean-based heroes already have it hard, so when they have to compete with other wet boys for the spotlight, and one of them is Namor the Submariner, they just get kind of the short end of the stick. Dr. Walter Newell was a brilliant oceanographer and engineer. He supervised the construction of a domed undersea city with plans to grow food for mankind, and he also constructed an incredibly advanced undersea suit that he initially used to try and capture Namor. Now, he's worked with the Avengers and the Fantastic Four many times over the years, mainly when the teams needed an undersea expert, and he even ran the now defunct Avengers Hydro base, but like I said, he just kinda gets overshadowed by Namor, which is a shame because Namor is kind of a huge jerk. But who better for a list of forgotten Avengers than a hero who literally goes by the name the Forgotten One? The Forgotten One is one of the Eternals, who themselves are already a bit of a niche group in Marvel Comics. As an Eternal living on Earth for thousands and thousands of years, he has gone by many different names, with his most well-known being taken after the ancient Mesopotamian hero Gilgamesh. While many Eternals have also been Avengers, Gilgamesh is simultaneously one of the strongest and one of the most easily forgotten. Unfortunately, he was only part of a small 4-person Avengers team consisting of Steve Rogers as just the captain, Mr. Fantastic, and Invisible Woman. The quartet didn't last long at all, and he was forced to leave the team due to an injury sustained in battle with Blastar. And he's just been kind of, well, forgotten. But talking about Gilgamesh does bring up another hero who people forget was an Avenger, Reed Richards. Mr. Fantastic is obviously extremely well known for being the leader of the Fantastic Four. That's his thing. Other than having a relatively lame power, which he has to have to make up for being super smart, and I guess for being the worst family man you have ever met. Reed is a huge name in Marvel, along with the other 3 members who make up Marvel's first family. But being such a big name, it does kind of make sense that he would be an Avenger as well. Reed would join up with the group during one of its roster shakeups, becoming a member of the Forgotten lineup that included Gilgamesh. But like we said before, that group didn't last long, and he hasn't really been an Avenger since, unless you count his time in the New Avengers inspired by the Illuminati, which I certainly do not. Now unfortunately, from time to time, characters are created to add some diversity to a team of heroes, but unfortunately, often those characters aren't given the most well-rounded characterization. Living Lightning, or Miguel Santos, is one such character. After first being turned into a being of living energy and after a brief, unwilling foray into crime, Miguel joined the Avengers. While he occasionally serves with the team, Miguel gave up active membership to concentrate on his studies. Now despite that, for a time Miguel manned the Avengers Deep Space Monitoring Station alongside Quasar, but his most damning moment came when Miguel was invited to attend a meeting of the Great Lakes Avengers, or the GLA, as they wanted to recruit him to join the team. Now Miguel mistakenly thought that the GLA actually stood for the Gay and Lesbian Association and accidentally came out to Flatman. Many people found this to be in poor taste, and while Living Lightning has appeared and worked with the Avengers a few times since, he was just never on the forefront since that moment. The Avengers are fun, and for me it's because a lot of the time their heroes could easily be villains and some of their villains could easily become heroes. And the best part is that totally happens. Jacques Duquesne, or Swordsman, is an excellent example. Jacques was the one who had taught Hawkeye how to fight, and just like Hawkeye, he started off as a villain to the team. Being a dastardly rogue with a great mustache, he was obviously a little morally dubious and found himself being expelled from the team only to rejoin later on. And then he would eventually pass away and come back as a spirit, which is when he married Mantis, as a ghost. His roguish nature, plus the fact that he's kind of just a dude with a sword, proved to make him an Avenger that is oft forgot. Heather Douglas is an incredibly interesting character, which is why it's kind of a shame that she is often forgotten about. At least her time as an Avenger definitely is. Heather and her family were wiped out by Thanos, and while her father would go on to become Drax the Destroyer, Heather went on to become one of the most powerful human-born telepaths in existence. She gained this power after she was taken in by Mentor, who is the father of Thanos, and she trained under the Shaolorn monks of Titan, who empowered her to unlock the potential of her mind. Now with that power, she was able to mentally control an entire planet of beings who were constantly at war with each other, bringing peace to said planet. She has been in a psionic stalemate with the Sorcerer Supreme, and she's even straight up took the life of a clone of Thanos who at the time had even greater mental powers than Professor X. The problem is that Moondragon has been both a hero and a villain throughout her times in comics, and she has had a very conflicted past with Marvel's premier superhero team. Jack Hart was the son of a brilliant scientist, a scientist that created the ridiculously efficient liquid sci-fi fuel called Zero Fluid, that in a tragic comic book backstory was exposed to Jack and gave him his awesome but difficult to control abilities. Importantly, he was also part alien, with his mother hailing from the Contraxian race. Now due to the cellular mutation that took place after his Zero Fluid exposure, Jonathan Hart is now able to produce pink concussive energy beams and blasts from his hands and body, taking up the incredibly clever name of Jack of Hearts. Now despite having the wildest costume on the team, he quickly became known for his erratic use of his explosive powers and for his incredibly explosive temper. He worked with the Avengers on several missions but never managed to master his powers. That, coupled with the character becoming increasingly isolated, led to Jack detonating himself, and that's the end of the story. Now the Sandman is a super interesting character. As most people know, he has been a longtime foe of Spider-Man, and a big one at that, being one of the founding members of the Sinister Six. However, never quite comfortable being a bad guy, the Sandman eventually reformed, even gaining a full presidential pardon. This brought on his probationary period with the Avengers, kicking off with the controversial Avengers number 329. Now despite actually proving a valuable asset to the team, he left the group not too long after joining. Sandman has generally remained a villain, but he maintains friendships with heroes including the Thing, and has been known to stop other villains from taking people's lives. After his stint with the Avengers, he would join up with the Silver Sable's Wild Pack, a mercenary group, before going back to a life of crime properly. Maria de Guadalupe Santiago, aka Silverclaw, was a member of the Kemikeri in the Central American nation of Costa Verde. The Kemikeri ancestors worshipped the ancient gods until the arrival of the Spaniards. Maria's father, Jaime Santiago, was a Kemikeri villager who studied the ancient beliefs and pantheon, and after visiting one of the ancient banished gods of his people, he came back to his village with Silverclaw in tow. Now, Silverclaw had the ability to shapeshift into various different were forms. The Avengers' butler, Edwin Jarvis, saw her village on a television piece about a children's charity and sponsored the local orphanage that Silverclaw grew up in, eventually having her come to New York, where she used her powers to stop a group of extremists, which got her onto the Avengers. Unfortunately, Silverclaw was created by Kurt Busiek and George Perez during their legendary 90s run on the Avengers, so when her creators moved on from the series, she kind of fell to the wayside completely as well. And finally, you would be forgiven for not knowing the hero Triathlon. It's just not a great superhero name in my opinion, but you might actually recognize this hero by his other horrible superhero name, 3D Man. But this isn't even the original 3D Man. Delroy Garrett Jr. is actually a disgraced Olympic athlete who decided to return to religion. He became the spokesperson of the Triune or Triune Understanding, a religious cult whose leader gave Delroy the powers of 3D Man. This cult's leader essentially used public pressure to make the Avengers recruit Delroy, who then had a bit of a tough time fitting in at Avengers Mansion. Eventually, Triathlon decided to abandon the Triune Understanding and even stop the leader from becoming a god, but then Triathlon left the Avengers. He did briefly return to act as an instructor for Tony Stark's 50 State Initiative, and he popped up again as one of Dr. Doom's Avengers, but I mean, anyone who cared about either of those events really didn't care about Triathlon's involvement in said events.
The friendly neighborhood web slinger has been swinging since 1962. It's hard to remember everyone he swung at. Let's see if we can get those wheels turning, ladies and gentlemen. Clear any brain fog, and you will soon learn that there were 3 villains referenced in this intro. The superiority complex this man has is almost laughable. The gentleman is his name, but he is literally anything but. His real name is Gustav, and he is the type that is considered a threat even in the underground. He also, and this is where the superiority complex comes in, he believes that he is part of a superior group and that most people in the world are simply wastes of space, and the only thing they provide to society is being cannon fodder. He is a villain, I'll give him that. His absolutely wild connection to Peter Parker, he was almost the guy that killed Peter's parents. He was trying to get Logan, but Peter's parents stepped in. In retaliation, the gentleman alerted another bad guy about the Parkers, and then that guy ended up being responsible for the parents. The gentleman did request for Peter's life to be spared so Peter could be a later challenge. It's messed up. He did learn about the accident that made Peter Spider-Man and even kind of protected the kid by ending anyone who knew Peter's identity. So he did good things in really twisted ways and bad things in twisted ways. If he does something, it's probably twisted. For all his superior thinking, he was just a regular human, no superpowers. His only power was financial power as he was rich. He did have a bodyguard named Pity with the ability to create darkness. This villain has 5 known appearances in the comics, but a what would have been a major role in the Amazing Spider-Man films. I love those movies, and the cliffhanger they were left on, I think about it once a week and get upset. The gentleman appeared in the mid-credits scene in the first movie, and after the big fight in the second movie, he's presumably the one hinting at forming the Sinister Six in that franchise. I'm so mad we never got to see it. Fog literally slipped through our fingers. He does have a power. He can turn his body into green fog on command. He can make his body dense to an extent as well, like a ghost that can touch things and choke things. The villain is described as a slippery ghost of mist. He uses his powers to assist him in his line of work, that being a contract slayer. He actually started out as just a regular human that had a not so regular line of work, but when he was set to end a physicist, an explosion in the lab gave him his powers. He didn't work alone though. His partner in crime literally was Knight, but we will talk about him next. The duo was hired by Kingpin to take down the Arranger, and they did, and that's what brought Spider-Man into the mix. Spidey chased the criminals down and defeated them by knocking them out. That all happened in the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 165 to 167 in 1990. No one knew where they went for the longest time after this until 2004's Marvel Knights Spider-Man. They had a very small cameo in the scene where Venom is being introduced. After that, again, Where are they? Moving on to the other half of the destructive duo, Knight, spelled like a medieval knight because that is what he was. The power he got from the lab explosion was the ability to turn himself into a knight, the medieval man of armor. The knight form is a very strong suit. It can resist most forms of harm, except for lots of electricity. That's what Spidey used to knock them out in that previously mentioned comic. Also, just so you know, the characters' real last names are Fog and Knight. This was always in the cards for them. In the comics, it's theorized that the characters turned into their last names because that was how they saw themselves. So one thing about Peter's story is that he's bullied. He gets bullied in high school, right? We all know that. What if I told you there was someone who got bullied even more? Not to make this the Pain Olympics, but Peter is losing to Charles Wiederman, later Molten Man. He became Molten Man when he attempted to create a vibranium skin suit that would protect soldiers from any impact. The guy cut corners though, which led to the vibranium in the lab to blow up and attach itself to Charles. Now Charles was coated in vibranium and has all the powers that vibranium does. Unfortunately, the suit and the lab had a bunch of chemicals in them, and Charles's mental stability is soon holding on by a thread. He goes around on a slaying spree to find former classmates that bullied him. He took out a few people and burned down Peter's apartment. He's nothing if not thorough. Eventually, Peter realized that vibranium, Molten Man himself, can be hardened under extreme pressure, so Peter trapped Molten Man in a pressurized chamber which caused Molten Man's body to harden and prevent him from moving. The good news is Charles volunteered to get tested on for a cure to metals wearing people. Happens more often than you think in Marvel, and he was cured, lived happily ever after. Big Wheel is the villain, and he drives a, you guessed it, big wheel. His last name is also Wheel, so we should have seen this coming. Jackson Wheel was a villain even in his everyday job. He was a businessman, specifically a corrupt one that embezzled money. He hired this other villain called Rocket Racer to steal the evidence of his crimes, but Racer withheld the documents and asked for more money. He told Wheel that his jet-powered skateboard was going to keep at Wheel's case until he paid him. Wheel decided to hire the Tinkerer to create a weapon for him to fight the skateboard. That weapon was the Big Wheel, a large monowheel equipped with armor and various weapons. The Big Wheel and Spider-Man fought for the first time when Spider-Man was fighting Racer actually. Wheel was after Racer and chased him through traffic, flattening cars on the way. The Racer led Big Wheel to the water, and just before Racer was going to get crushed and pulled in, he was pulled out by Spider-Man and the wheel fell into the Hudson River. He survived and would go on to cause chaos for various other heroes, including Spider-Woman. In total, Big Wheel has just under 20 appearances. The name Draco, when I say that, you probably think of the blonde from the Harry Potter series, but that name also belongs to an interesting Spider-Man villain. Q Drake was a scientist, winning a Nobel Peace Prize for his work in the field of biology. The man would turn out to be anything but peaceful though, and honestly was just the lizard in a different font. Drake's research project was combining iguana genes with humans, tested it out on himself, and became Draco the Dragon. He walked like a man but had the fire of a dragon as well as poisonous gas. He was huge and had these massive wings when there was this meteor shower, and that's when Draco first appeared, so it looked like he had flown down into space. Also a play on the Draco constellation there. To top it off, he made such a grand entrance he declared he wanted to rule the Earth. Classic move. Spider-Man and Draco ended up fighting at the top of the Empire State Building, and when Draco fell off, he transformed into a little iguana and disappeared into a wall. That's it. This story was part of this thing Marvel Comics did in the 1970s, where they released a story on record instead of on the page, so it's no wonder he slipped away and we haven't seen him again. This guy makes me so sad. He was a villain at first, but he didn't want to be. Mindworm was born with his powers. They weren't good powers, so he was set up from the start. He had the ability to drain mental energy from people around him. His other powers were mental based too, like telepathy and mind wave blasts and illusions. He was also known to invade dreams, be a natural genius, and when he drains energy, he could do that to the point of death, but he didn't want to do that. Though he wasn't strong physically that much, he could absorb so much energy and make himself very strong, even strong enough to fight Spider-Man. The character has less than 10 appearances and has lived quite the heartbreaking life in those 10 appearances. When he was born, he didn't know how to control his powers. He was literally a baby, so he accidentally made himself an orphan. In the orphanage, people started calling him Mindworm. He aged out and moved to a neighborhood in New York where he could harmlessly feed off the residents. He was found by Spider-Man and the two fought each other. Spidey won, they fought again, and Spider-Man won again, but double won this time because Mindworm realized that he wanted to be a good guy. Unfortunately, Mindworm was taken advantage of by some some goons and went to jail. He couldn't hold down a job after jail and became homeless and was eventually beaten on the street and passed before Spider-Man could help. It was really sad. R.I.P. Mindworm. Polestar, or Thomas Duffy, has had about 2 appearances, which means there really isn't much to tell here. He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 409 in 1996 and then died that same year in Spider-Man Unlimited 14. What did he do in that short time? Well, he was a player in the Great Game. Polestar, Rhino, and Joystick teamed up together to fight the friendly neighborhood web-slinger. Polestar wore a suit that generates a magnetic field, allowing the villain to attract and repel whatever he wants to fight with. It's also resistant to Peter's webbing. Of course, even 3 against 1, Spider-Man came out on top and Polestar went to jail. Eventually he got out but was shot in a different battle and perished. This fashion icon should be in the pages of Vogue, not forgotten. Belladonna, also known as Madame Belladonna to distinguish from another character with the same name, was an American in Europe. She opened a fashion design business with her sister and all was well, slaying the game, until this man came along and ruined everything. Roderick Kingsley, #NotMyRoderick, came along and stole the sisters' designs and took them to America to sell. Also, Kingsley later became the Hobgoblin, so he sucks literally across the board. Madame Belladonna was rightfully very angry about her stuff being stolen and put together a team of henchmen to track the goblin down. The team found him and attacked, but Spider-Man swooped in to save the guy because he was just a defenseless human at this time after all. There were a series of fights until finally Belladonna and her henchmen were webbed up by the spider and left for the authorities. Belladonna only appears in 3 issues: Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man 43, 47, and 48. And we don't know where she is, if she's designing prison jumpsuits, I don't know. Other characters are now named Belladonna and have no correlation to her. Of what's been shown, Belladonna has no superpowers, but she is very good at chemistry and of course design. She has a gas gun that can render someone unconscious. She will also put this gas in perfume bottles for a more high fashion look. The gas and her name come from the belladonna plant. Sticks and Stones are the villains here. They had very different origins but are both super cool. So Sticks was originally homeless and not doing well, so when Stone's team of scientists showed up looking for homeless people to experiment on, Sticks was all for it since it paid well. It gave him way more than he bargained for though. His trial resulted in him becoming a living cancer. Anything he touched would rot away. Stone has powers like that too, plus his genius scientific mind, and he has a bunch of weapons. The difference between Sticks and Stones is that Sticks rots organic matter and Stone rots inorganic matter, so together they are the worst. To make everything even more unsettling, Sticks can make his fingers longer, all the more easy to grab things to rot. The pair debuted in Amazing Spider-Man 309. They have fought not just Spider-Man, but also Deadpool. Deadpool is the choice to fight these guys, I think. The pair have about 10 appearances.